What happens when an awakened person meets their soulmate is not a romantic event in the ordinary sense, nor is it a coincidence arranged by fate in the sentimental way the word is often used. It is a psychological encounter of rare intensity, one that shakes the foundations of identity and calls into question everything the individual believed they had already understood about themselves. Awakening, in this sense, does not mean perfection or transcendence of human struggle. It refers to a heightened awareness of inner life, a conscious relationship with the unconscious, and a willingness to confront truth, even when it destabilizes the ego. When such a person meets a soulmate, the encounter does not bring comfort first. It brings recognition, disturbance, and an unmistakable sense of inevitability. The awakened psyche does not meet another merely as a personality shaped by biography and preference. It meets another as a symbolic reality. Long before the first words are exchanged, something ancient stirs beneath consciousness. The encounter feels familiar, yet unplaceable, as if an inner image long carried in silence has suddenly stepped into physical form. In the archetypes and the collective unconscious, it is written that certain encounters activate primordial patterns that lie dormant until the right constellation appears. The soulmate is not created in that moment, they are revealed. They emerge as a living mirror of an inner figure that has shaped desire, fear, and longing from the depths. For the awakened person, this recognition is immediate and unsettling. It bypasses logic and strikes directly at the core of the psyche. There is a sense of being seen without explanation, of being addressed at a level where words are unnecessary. This does not feel safe, it feels exposing. The ego, which has worked hard to establish coherence and control, suddenly realizes it is not sovereign. Something larger has entered the field. In psychological types, it is suggested that true encounters do not confirm the ego's self-image, but relativize it. The soulmate does exactly this. They do not flatter the awakened person's consciousness, they challenge it. What is often called a soulmate is, in psychological terms, a carrier of projection. But projection here is not a mistake. It is a necessary stage. The awakened individual has already withdrawn many unconscious projections from the world, which is why their relationships are often calmer, more grounded, and less compulsive. When a soulmate appears, the remaining projections are activated with extraordinary force. These projections are not superficial desires, they are archetypal images, often associated with the inner masculine or feminine, described in Aeon as central mediators between consciousness and the unconscious. The soulmate appears luminous because they are illuminated by psychic energy that does not originate in them alone. This intensity can be frightening precisely because the awakened person recognizes what is happening. They sense that this is not infatuation in the ordinary sense, nor is it mere compatibility. It feels like destiny, yet awakening has taught them to distrust romantic inflation. They know that what feels absolute may conceal unconscious material demanding integration. And yet, the pull remains. The psyche insists. The encounter activates both longing and resistance, devotion and caution, surrender and vigilance. Other psychological traditions converge on this phenomenon. Object relations theory, particularly in the writings of D.W. Winnicott, suggests that certain relationships awaken the true self by providing a mirror that neither intrudes nor withdraws. The soulmate for the awakened person functions paradoxically as both mirror and disruptor. They reflect what is most authentic, while simultaneously destabilizing defenses that once protected that authenticity. Attachment theory would describe this as a bond that activates both secure longing and old attachment wounds. But depth psychology goes further. It recognizes that this bond serves a teleological function. It moves the psyche toward wholeness. The awakened person does not fall in love blindly. They fall with awareness, and this awareness intensifies the experience rather than diminishing it. They notice how the soulmate evokes forgotten memories, childhood longings, and unexpressed potentials. They become aware of emotional reactions that feel disproportionate to present reality. Jealousy, fear of loss, reverence, and even awe may surface unexpectedly. These reactions are not signs of regression. They are indicators that deep psychic layers have been activated. In symbols of transformation, it is argued that when archetypal energies are constellated, consciousness is flooded with meaning. The soulmate encounter is saturated with such meaning. What makes this encounter transformative rather than merely intoxicating is the awakened person's capacity for reflection. Instead of acting out every impulse, they observe the inner drama unfolding. They recognize that the soulmate carries qualities they are being called to develop within themselves: strength, softness, creativity, decisiveness, vulnerability. Whatever is perceived as magnetic C in the other often corresponds to a latent or underdeveloped aspect of the self. The encounter becomes a summons. It demands growth rather than possession. This demand creates tension. The awakened person often feels torn between the desire to merge and the need to remain differentiated. They know that psychological union cannot be achieved through fusion. In the relations between the ego and the unconscious, it is emphasized that identification with archetypal figures leads to inflation and loss of balance. The awakened individual senses this danger intuitively. They feel the pull toward total surrender, but resist collapsing their individuality into the relationship. The soulmate thus becomes a site of conscious struggle rather than unconscious entanglement. The struggle is intensified because the soulmate often mirrors the awakened person's shadow. Qualities that were previously integrated on a conceptual level are now experienced emotionally. Impatience, control, withdrawal, idealization, fear of abandonment. These traits appear not as abstract tendencies, but as lived reactions. The soulmate touches wounds that no amount of solitary self-work could reach. In the shadow, it is suggested that relationships are the primary arenas in which the shadow reveals itself. The awakened person understands this, but understanding does not eliminate pain. It only gives it meaning. At this stage, many illusions about love collapse. The awakened person realizes that the soulmate is no here to complete them, but to confront them. The fantasy of effortless harmony dissolves. What remains is something more demanding and more real, a relationship that insists on truth. In this sense, the soulmate encounter resembles what existential psychologists such as Rollo May described as an encounter with being itself, an experience that heightens aliveness while increasing anxiety. Love here is not anesthesia, it is amplification. Time behaves strangely in such relationships. The connection feels ancient, as if it predates biography. Yet it also feels urgently present, as though something essential is unfolding now or never. This paradox reflects the psyche's experience of archetypal time, where past, present, and future converge. In memories, dreams, reflections, it is suggested that certain encounters feel fated because they activate patterns that have been forming unconsciously for years. The soulmate appears when the psyche is ready to bear the consequences of such activation. The awakened person also notices that this relationship alters their orientation toward life. Priorities shift. What once seemed important loses its grip. Solitary practices, ambitions, and identities are questioned. This does not mean they are abandoned, but they are re-evaluated. The soulmate acts as a catalyst, accelerating individuation rather than distracting from it. The awakened individual senses that avoiding this encounter would require a denial of something essential, even if anger. Jing with it carries risk. Yet risk is precisely what awakening has prepared them for. They know that growth demands exposure. They also know that not every soulmate encounter results in a lasting partnership. Some are brief but decisive. leaving irreversible changes in their wake. Others unfold over time, requiring sustained commitment and conscious effort. The psyche does not measure success by duration, but by transformation. In the structure and dynamics of the psyche, it is noted that psychic events are meaningful insofar as they reorganize the personality. The soulmate encounter does exactly this. Other psychologists have described similar phenomena in different language. Abraham Maslow observed that peak experiences often involve profound connection and self-transcendence. Carl Rogers emphasized that genuine encounter requires congruence, empathy, and unconditional positive regard. The soulmate relationship, when approached consciously, contains these elements, but it also goes beyond them. It confronts the individual with unconscious material that cannot be resolved through empathy alone. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to endure ambiguity. As the relationship deepens, the awakened person becomes increasingly aware that love here is inseparable from suffering, not because the relationship is inherently destructive, but because it exposes vulnerabilities that were previously protected. The fear of loss intensifies because the connection feels irreplaceable. The ego resists this vulnerability, attempting to control outcomes or retreat into detachment. The awakened person recognizes these defenses as old strategies resurfacing. The soulmate becomes the arena in which these strategies are tested and potentially transformed. This is where many relationships falter. Consciousness alone does not guarantee integration. The awakened person may see what is happening and still struggle to live it. Insight does not immediately translate into capacity. In the practice of psychotherapy, it is acknowledged that knowing and being are separated by a difficult path. The soulmate encounter shortens this path by making avoidance impossible. Every defense has relational consequences. Every unconscious reaction is mirrored back. The intensity of this mirroring can lead to moments of withdrawal, confusion, or even separation. These moments are not necessarily failures. They often represent the psyche's attempt to regulate overwhelming energy. The awakened person learns that pacing matters. Depth must be metabolized gradually. Too much confrontation too quickly can destabilize even a conscious psyche. The soulmate relationship teaches rhythm, when to approach, when to step back, when to speak, when to remain silent. Throughout this process, the sense of meaning remains strong, even when clarity is absent. The awakened person may not know where the relationship is going, but they know it is not accidental. The psyche experiences it as necessary. This necessity does not come from external obligation, but from inner alignment. Something in the encounter resonates with the direction of the self, that organizing center described in Aeon as the totality of the psyche. The soulmate appears not as an object of possession, but as a participant in a larger movement toward wholeness. As time unfolds, the awakened person begins to see that the soulmate is not there to save them from solitude, but to deepen it. Solitude here does not mean isolation. It means the capacity to stand in oneself without fragmentation. The relationship tests whether intimacy can coexist with autonomy. It challenges the individual to love without losing center, to commit without collapsing boundaries. These are not romantic ideals. They are psychological achievements. The awakened person also becomes aware that the soulmate is undergoing their own process, often equally intense and destabilizing. Projection flows both ways. Each carries an inner image that the other activates. Mutual recognition does not guarantee mutual readiness. This asymmetry can create tension, longing, and frustration. The awakened individual must then confront a difficult truth. Awakening does not grant control over outcomes. It grants responsibility for one's own responses. In this responsibility lies the deepest transformation. The awakened person learns to hold love without grasping, to endure uncertainty without retreating into illusion. They begin to understand that true gift of the soulmate encounter is not union, but consciousness. The relationship becomes a living symbol, a dialogue between ego and unconscious, enacted through another human being. It is here, in this ongoing dialogue, that something continues to unfold, not toward a final resolution, but toward ever-deepening awareness of what love demands, what the psyche reveals, and what remains unfinished in the meeting of two souls who recognize each other not as answers, but as questions still opening. In this opening, where answers dissolve into questions, the awakened person begins to sense that the soulmate encounter is less about arriving somewhere together and more about being drawn into a shared field of transformation. The relationship becomes a living process rather than a static bond. Each interaction carries symbolic weight. Each conflict reveals something hidden. Each silence speaks. The awakened psyche does not interpret these moments merely as interpersonal events, but as messages from the deeper layers of being, asking to be understood rather than resolved too quickly. One of the most striking features of this encounter is how it collapses the distance between inner and outer worlds. Previously, the awakened person may have done much of their psychological work internally through reflection, solitude, reading, meditation, or therapy. With the soulmate, inner material is no longer contained within the psyche alone. It steps into the room embodied in another person. Traits once encountered as abstract tendencies now appear as relational realities. The unconscious becomes visible, audible, and responsive. This can feel both exhilarating and terrifying because it removes the safety of private interpretation. The awakened individual notices that ordinary defenses lose their effectiveness here. Intellectualization, spiritual bypassing, emotional withdrawal, strategies that once created equilibrium begin to fail. The soulmate sees through them, not intentionally, but structurally. The psyche has arranged the encounter so that evasion becomes difficult. In the psychology of the transference, it is suggested that certain relationships constellate unconscious contents precisely because the psyche is ready to integrate them. The soulmate is such a constellation. They arrive when the inner tension between what is known and what is lived has reached a critical point. As this tension intensifies, the awakened person may experience moments of disillusionment. The soulmate, once perceived as luminous and complete, reveals ordinary human limitations. Inconsistencies appear, fears surface, contradictions emerge. For an unawakened psyche, this might signal the end of idealization and the beginning of disappointment. For the awakened psyche, it signals something deeper, the opportunity to withdraw projection consciously. The light seen in the other is not extinguished, it is relocated. It must now be claimed inwardly. This withdrawal is painful because it feels like loss. The sense of magic fades, replaced by complexity. Yet depth psychology insists that this stage is not regression, but progression. In Mysterium Coniunctionis, it is argued that true union is preceded by separation and disillusionment. The psyche must endure the breakdown of fantasy to approach a more authentic form of connection. The awakened person understands this conceptually, but living it requires patience and humility. The ego mourns the loss of perfection, even as the self moves closer to reality. During this phase, conflict often becomes unavoidable. Differences that were initially overlooked now demand attention. Communication becomes charged. Old wounds are triggered repeatedly, sometimes unexpectedly. The awakened person may feel confused by the intensity of their reactions, wondering how a relationship that feels so meaningful can also be so destabilizing. This confusion is part of the process. The psyche is reorganizing itself around a deeper center, and reorganization is inherently chaotic. In the dynamics of the unconscious, it is emphasized that psychic transformation involves periods of disorder before new order emerges. What distinguishes the awakened person here is not the absence of conflict, but their relationship to it. Rather than seeking immediate resolution or escape, they attempt to understand what the conflict symbolizes. They ask not only what is happening between us, but what is happening within me. This dual inquiry prevents the relationship from collapsing into blame or idealization. It keeps the encounter alive as a psychological dialogue. At the same time, the awakened person must confront a subtle danger, the temptation to turn the relationship into a spiritual project. When meaning is intense, the ego may inflate itself by believing it understands more than it actually does. The soulmate can become a canvas onto which theories of growth, destiny, or transcendence are projected. Depth psychology warns against this inflation. In Aeon, it is noted that identification with archetypal processes can lead to loss of grounding and ethical responsibility. The soulmate is not an abstract symbol. They are a human being with their own limits and autonomy. This recognition demands restraint. The awakened person learns that awareness does not grant entitlement. They cannot demand that the relationship unfold according to an inner vision, no matter how compelling it feels. The other is not obligated to participate in the awakened person's individuation. This realization can be sobering. It forces the individual to distinguish between inner necessity and outer consent. Love, in its mature form, respects this distinction. As the relationship continues, the awakened person may notice cycles of closeness and distance. Periods of intense connection are followed by withdrawal, reflection, or even separation. These cycles often mirror inner processes. When unconscious material surfaces too quickly, distance provides integration time. When integration stabilizes, closeness resumes. The relationship develops its own rhythm, one that cannot be forced without consequence. Learning to trust this rhythm is part of the awakening that the soulmate encounter deepens. Other psychological thinkers have described similar oscillations. Esther Perel speaks of the tension between intimacy and autonomy as fundamental to desire. Existential psychology recognizes that authentic encounters require both presence and freedom. What depth psychology adds is the recognition that these oscillations are not merely interpersonal preferences, but expressions of psychic regulation. The psyche seeks balance, and the soulmate relationship magnifies every imbalance until it is addressed. Throughout this process, the awakened person may experience an increase in symbolic activity. Dreams become vivid and emotionally charged. Themes of union, separation, pursuit, and loss recur. These dreams are not predictions, they are compensations. The unconscious responds to conscious attitudes, offering images that reveal what is neglected or overemphasized. In dream analysis, it is suggested that such dreams often accompany major life transitions. The soulmate encounter is one such transition, not because it guarantees permanence, but because it reorganizes meaning. The awakened person also becomes more aware of how this relationship reshapes their sense of time. The future feels both open and pressing. Decisions carry weight. Delaying choices feels costly, yet rushing feels dangerous. This temporal tension reflects the psyche's awareness that something essential is at stake. The relationship has become a vessel for potential transformation, and the psyche resists treating it casually. In the psychology of the child archetype, it is suggested that new beginnings often appear fragile and demanding precisely because they carry future potential. As awareness deepens, the awakened person may begin to sense that the soulmate encounter is not solely about personal fulfillment, but about ethical development. How one loves under such conditions matters. The intensity of the bond amplifies the consequences of action and inaction alike. Honesty becomes non-negotiable. Avoidance has immediate repercussions. The individual is called to a higher standard of responsibility, not imposed from outside, but arising from inner coherence. To betray oneself here feels as damaging as betraying the other. This ethical dimension is often overlooked in romantic narratives, but it is central in depth psychology. In the conscience in psychological perspective, it is suggested that conscience evolves as consciousness deepens. The soulmate relationship accelerates this evolution by placing the individual in situations where values are tested in real time. Choices cannot be postponed indefinitely. Silence communicates as much as speech. The awakened person becomes acutely aware that love is not merely a feeling but a series of lived decisions. Yet even with this awareness, uncertainty remains. The awakened person does not know whether the relationship will endure or dissolve. They learn to live with this not knowing. This is perhaps the most difficult lesson. The ego seeks guarantees. The psyche offers meaning without certainty. To remain present without clinging to outcome requires trust in the process itself. This trust is not blind faith. It is grounded in repeated experience of inner alignment. The awakened person has learned, through previous transformations, that what serves individuation may not serve comfort. At times, the relationship may feel unbearably heavy, as if too much is being asked of two human beings. The awakened person may question whether the intensity is sustainable. This questioning is legitimate. Depth psychology does not romanticize suffering. It asks whether suffering is meaningful or repetitive. If the relationship becomes a closed circuit of pain without integration, the psyche will eventually signal the need for change. Awakening includes the capacity to discern when an experience has fulfilled its function. If separation occurs, it is rarely clean. The bond does not dissolve easily because it was never merely personal. The awakened person may carry the presence of the soulmate inwardly long after physical contact ends. The relationship continues symbolically, shaping values, desires, and self-understanding. In this sense, the soulmate encounter never truly ends. It is metabolized into the psyche, becoming part of the individual's inner landscape. In memories, dreams, reflections, it is suggested that certain encounters remain psychologically alive regardless of external circumstances. If the relationship continues, it does so on altered terms. Illusion has fallen away. What remains is a bond that must be consciously maintained. Passion may deepen or quiet. Conflict may persist or transform. What matters is that both individuals remain participants rather than prisoners. The awakened person understands that love, at this level, is not about losing oneself, but about standing more fully in oneself while allowing the other to do the same. As the psyche integrates what the soulmate has activated, the awakened person notices changes beyond the relationship. Creativity may increase. Old patterns of avoidance weaken. Decisions align more closely with inner values. The individual feels more real to themselves. These changes indicate that the encounter has fulfilled at least part of its psychological purpose. The soulmate has functioned as a catalyst, not a destination. Still, the sense of mystery does not disappear. Even with insight, the awakened person cannot fully explain why this particular person appeared, why this connection unfolded in this way. Depth psychology respects this remainder. It acknowledges that not all meaning can be articulated. Some experiences are understood only through their effects. The soulmate encounter leaves traces, shifts in perception, capacity, and orientation that continue to influence life long after the initial intensity subsides. What becomes increasingly clear is that awakening does not culminate in resolution, but in participation. The awakened person participates more consciously in love, conflict, and uncertainty. The soulmate encounter intensifies this participation, demanding presence rather than answers. It invites the individual to live the questions rather than resolve them prematurely. In this living, the awakened person recognizes that the soulmate was never meant to be possessed or fully understood. They were meant to be encountered. The encounter itself is the event. It opens a door that cannot be closed, not because it promises eternal union, but because it reveals a deeper layer of reality in which love is inseparable from consciousness, and transformation remains ongoing, unfolding through each interaction, each choice, each moment of courage or hesitation, as the psyche continues to explore what it means to meet another, not as an escape from oneself, but as an invitation to become more fully what one already is, still discovering, still questioning, still engaged in a process that refuses final answers and instead continues to ask, through the presence of another soul, what it means to awaken within relationship and to remain awake as the bond itself continues to change, deepen, fracture, and reconfigure in ways that can never be entirely predicated or concluded. In this ongoing movement, where the relationship refuses to settle into a fixed meaning, the awakened person gradually realizes that the soulmate encounter is teaching them how to remain present in the face of paradox. Love here is not an escape from inner work, but its most demanding expression. Every attempt to simplify the bond by labeling it destiny, mistake, or lesson completed feels insufficient. The psyche resists closure because closure would imply that the process has ended. What is unfolding is not a story with a final chapter, but a reorientation of how the individual relates to self, other, and the unknown. One of the most profound shifts occurs in the awakened person's relationship to desire. Desire is no longer experienced merely as craving or lack, but as information. It points toward undeveloped capacities, unlived possibilities, and unresolved conflicts. The soulmate intensifies desire not to satisfy it fully, but to make it conscious. In psychological types, it is suggested that desire often compensates for what consciousness has neglected. The awakened person begins to ask not only what they want from the other, but what that wanting reveals about their own inner direction. This reframing alters how frustration is experienced. When expectations are unmet, the awakened person feels the familiar sting of disappointment, yet something new accompanies it: curiosity. Instead of collapsing into resentment or self-blame, they observe how expectation itself arises. They see how the psyche seeks certainty, reassurance, and mirroring. The soulmate relationship exposes these needs with unusual clarity. It becomes evident that love does not eliminate insecurity, it illuminates it. Awakening lies not in the absence of insecurity, but in the willingness to see it without distortion. At times, the awakened person may feel an urge to withdraw from the intensity altogether. The psyche seeks rest. Too much depth without grounding can become overwhelming. This withdrawal is not a rejection of love, but an attempt at self-regulation. In the transcendent function, it is described how the psyche creates tension between opposites to generate transformation, but also how this tension must be held carefully to avoid collapse. The awakened person learns to listen to signals of exhaustion, honoring limits without abandoning the process. This listening fosters a more embodied awareness. The relationship is no longer lived solely in thought and feeling, but in sensation. The body responds immediately to the presence or absence of the soulmate, tightening, opening, relaxing, bracing. These responses carry information that the awakened person learns to respect. Somatic awareness grounds the intensity of the bond, preventing it from becoming purely psychological or symbolic. The psyche and body begin to work together, aligning insight with lived experience. As embodiment deepens, the awakened person becomes more sensitive to moments of authenticity. Small gestures, brief exchanges, shared silence. These moments carry disproportionate weight. They feel real in a way that dramatic declarations do not. The psyche recognizes them as truthful. In the reality of the psyche, it is suggested that truth often appears quietly, without spectacle. The soulmate relationship trains the awakened person to recognize and value this quiet truth, even when it contradicts fantasy. Fantasy, however, does not disappear. It evolves. Instead of projecting perfection, the awakened person may find themselves fantasizing about integration, about what could emerge if both individuals remained conscious and committed to growth. This fantasy is less intoxicating and more demanding. It requires patience, dialogue, and mutual responsibility. The awakened person holds this vision lightly, aware that clinging to it could distort reality. The fantasy becomes a guiding image rather than a demand. This lightness allows space for humor, an often overlooked aspect of deep psychological bonds. When awareness increases, the ability to laugh at one's own patterns grows. The awakened person may recognize recurring reactions and smile at their predictability. This humor does not trivialize pain, it humanizes it. It prevents the relationship from becoming overly solemn or burdened by meaning. Depth and lightness coexist, creating a dynamic balance. As the relationship continues, the awakened person may begin to sense that the soulmate encounter is influencing their relationship with the collective. Social roles, cultural expectations, and inherited narratives about love and success lose some of their authority. The individual feels less compelled to conform to external scripts. In the individual and society, it is suggested that individuation alters one's relationship to the collective unconscious. The soulmate relationship accelerates this alteration by revealing how deeply collective ideals shape personal longing. This shift can be isolating. Friends and family may not understand the nature of the bond or the choices it inspires. The awakened person may struggle to articulate what feels essential without sounding abstract or evasive. This difficulty highlights a fundamental truth: some experiences cannot be translated fully into collective language. They must be lived rather than explained. The awakened person learns to tolerate misunderstanding without retreating into secrecy or defensiveness. Tolerance extends inward as well. The awakened person becomes more patient with their own contradictions. They may notice simultaneous impulses to commit and to flee, to trust and to protect, to open and to close. Rather than forcing resolution, they allow these impulses to coexist. This capacity to hold inner conflict without immediate action marks a significant psychological maturation. In the structure of the unconscious, it is emphasized that psychic growth depends on the ego's ability to endure tension. The soulmate relatio ship strengthens this capacity through lived necessity. Over time, the awakened person may observe that their sense of identity has subtly shifted. They no longer define themselves primarily through roles, achievements, or even solitary insight. Identity becomes more fluid, relational, and process-oriented. They experience themselves as someone who is becoming rather than someone who has arrived. The soulmate encounter reinforces this orientation by continually revealing new facets of self in relation to another. The self becomes less fixed and more responsive. This responsiveness also extends to endings. The awakened person begins to understand that endings are not failures but transitions. If the relationship changes form or concludes, it does not negate its significance. The psyche measures meaning by depth of engagement, not permanence. In transformation symbolism, it is suggested that psychic events fulfill their purpose when they have altered the inner landscape. The soulmate encounter, once metabolized, continues to influence choices, values, and perceptions, regardless of its external status. Yet even with this understanding, loss remains painful. Awakening does not numb grief, it sharpens it. The awakened person feels loss fully, without anesthetic. They grieve not only the other, but the version of themselves that existed in relation to that other. This grief is complex and layered. It includes gratitude, regret, longing, and acceptance. The psyche processes it slowly, integrating its lessons over time. If the relationship endures, grief still appears in subtler forms. Grief for what could not be expressed, for moments missed, for misunderstandings that linger. The awakened person accepts that no relationship, however deep, can actualize all potential. This acceptance does not diminish love, it refines it. Love becomes less about fulfillment and more about presence. Presence, in this sense, is the ultimate offering of the awakened person. To be present means to meet the other without agenda, to listen without immediately interpreting, to respond rather than react. The soulmate relationship challenges presence relentlessly because it stirs so much unconscious material. Each moment of genuine presence is therefore an achievement. It represents a victory over compulsion and projection. As presence deepens, the awakened person may notice moments of profound stillness within the relationship. These moments feel timeless, as if the usual psychological noise has fallen silent. There is no urgency to speak or act. Being together feels sufficient. In the experience of the self, it is suggested that such moments reflect alignment with a deeper psychic center. The soulmate relationship occasionally opens this space, offering a glimpse of what integration feels like. These moments cannot be summoned at will. They arise spontaneously and fade naturally. The awakened person learns not to cling to them. Clinging would turn grace into demand. Instead, they receive these moments as confirmation that the relationship is touching something essential, even if that something cannot be sustained continuously as life continues to unfold around the relationship. Work, aging, uncertainty, change, the awakened person remains aware that the soulmate encounter is embedded in a larger context. It does not exempt them from ordinary responsibilities or existential realities. Instead, it sharpens their engagement with them. Decisions carry more weight because they are made with greater awareness. The awakened person feels more accountable to themselves and to others. This accountability includes honesty about limitations. The awakened person recognizes that awakening does not eliminate fear, jealousy, or defensiveness. It alters how these states are met. Rather than identifying with them completely, the individual observes them, works with them, and takes responsibility for their impact. The soulmate relationship provides immediate feedback, making evasion difficult. Growth is accelerated not by intention alone, but by consequence. Gradually, the awakened person comes to see that the soulmate is not the source of awakening, but its mirror. Awakening prepared the psyche to recognize the soulmate. The soulmate intensifies awakening by testing it in relationship. This reciprocal dynamic creates a feedback loop in which consciousness deepens through encounter. Neither exists in isolation. The relationship and the awakening shape each other continuously. In this shaping, the awakened person discovers a deeper humility. They realize that insight does not place them above the messiness of human connection. If anything, it draws them more fully into it. Awakening reveals complexity rather than dissolving it. The soulmate encounter embodies this truth. It is beautiful and difficult, meaningful and unresolved, grounding and destabilizing. As the process continues, the awakened person no longer asks whether the soulmate will stay or leave, whether the relationship will succeed or fail. These questions lose their urgency. Instead, a quieter question emerges, one that persists beneath all others. How am I being called to show up in this encounter right now with honesty and courage? This question does not seek final answers. It seeks alignment. Alignment becomes the measure of integrity. Actions align with inner truth. The awakened person feels coherent even amid uncertainty. When misalignment occurs, discomfort arises quickly, signaling the need for correction. The soulmate relationship heightens this sensitivity, making integrity a lived necessity rather than an abstract ideal. In this way, the awakened person begins to understand that the deepest function of the soulmate encounter is not union, fulfillment, or even love as commonly imagined, but the refinement of consciousness through relationship. The other becomes a living edge against which the self is shaped. This shaping does not end. It continues as long as the psyche remains open to experience, and so the story does not resolve into certainty or closure. It remains open, dynamic, and alive. The awakened person walks forward carrying the imprint of the encounter, aware that something irreversible has occurred, not because the relationship provided answers, but because it altered the way questions are lived, the way love is understood, and the way the psyche continues to move toward deeper awareness through the unpredictable, demanding, and transformative experience of meeting another soul who awakens what cannot be learned alone, and who leaves behind a presence that continues to speak, not in conclusions, but in ongoing dialogue with the unfolding self. In the end, what happens when an awakened person meets their soulmate is not the fulfillment of a romantic myth, but the irreversible deepening of psychological truth. Such an encounter strips love of illusion and returns it to its most demanding form, a living dialogue between two inner worlds that refuse to remain unconscious. The soulmate does not arrive to complete the awakened person, nor to rescue them from solitude, but to confront them with the full cost and gift of awareness. Through attraction, conflict, tenderness, and rupture, the psyche is asked to mature, to love without possession, to see without distortion, and to remain faithful to inner truth even when certainty dissolves. This meeting leaves no one unchanged. It reorders values, sharpens perception, and anchors love not in fantasy or destiny, but in responsibility to the soul's ongoing transformation. What remains is not an answer, but a deeper capacity to live the question of love consciously, knowing that some encounters are not meant to end the journey, but to permanently alter the way the journey is walked.